Reverend Jeannie.
Thank you. Good morning, friends. Good morning. Greetings from Houston. Ron and I feel like we're still wobbling. We've been in the car for 16 hours. Convention went great. I have to tell you, it's always wonderful to see friends from around the country. That's our only time we get to connect usually, and people always enjoy it. We learned a lot. Dr. Raymond Moody was the featured speaker, and we certainly learned a lot from him. It was just a wonderful week, and I'm very grateful that Ron and I were able to go to represent our church, and next year it's going to be here, and we're the ones doing it. So I wish and hope that we could get that enthusiasm across to all of you. It is a good time to have spiritualists be together. As we were driving home, I was thinking, well, now what should I talk about Sunday? And I came to that nursery rhyme of all things. There was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. Well, you know, a lot of the poems and the fairy tales have been updated, and the most recent one I've read was, there once was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. And when she was good, she was criticized anyway. And I wonder how many of us feel that happens to us a lot. We go through life really trying to do our very, very best, and yet sometimes we feel like one of those little plastic dolls that children have. They whack them hard, and then it goes to the ground, but it comes back up, and then the child whacks it again, and it goes down, but it comes back up. And it doesn't matter what happens to us in life. We know as long as we will attune ourselves to spirit, we too will bounce back up. Now, I also was inclined, as we're traveling across the countryside, to think about the pioneers of the old days. And I have to tell you, I'm so glad that I'm born in this day and time. I just don't think I'd have lasted a week if I had to boil clothes to clean them, if I had to grow and pick and clean every single morsel that went in my mouth every single day, although granted, I'm sure I wouldn't be nearly this heavy. Women in those days made their own candles, they made their own soap. Now this doesn't mean the men were lolling around just whittling whistles and things, you know. The men were out working with sheep or with cattle, or they were out hunting to provide food for the family. People were extremely self-sufficient in those days. They had to be to survive. But if something happened, if a man's wife passed in childbirth and there were other children, then people, I can't even say the community, because often they didn't live in a neighborhood, but people would hear about it, and women would come, and they would bring food that they had toiled, they and their husbands had toiled to provide, and the wives had worked hard to prepare. The women would bring clothing for the surviving children that these women had made out of flour sacks, or sometimes fur, skins, what was available. But they would be there to help. They would bring some of their own homemade candles, some of their own homemade soap, because the men didn't do that. The men already had so much that they had to do to provide. And conversely, if a woman became widowed, other people would come and help her bring in the crop, get it ready, prepare it for their own food, prepare to take it somewhere to sell, so they would have money for next year's crop. If there were sheep that needed to be shorn, other men would come and do that, so the widow would have something to provide for herself and her children. So in those days when there was a need and people helped fill it for one another, it required a tremendous amount of love, of physical work, of planning and working together. And I have to tell you, nowadays we're pretty blessed. Now if there is a need, we have our church food pantry, and it's there for anyone who is in need, and it is kept confidential. If someone is in need of a ride, someone else has a vehicle and can take them or pick them up. If someone else has a need, if they are ill, if they've just come home from the hospital, it's so easy for us to take something out of the freezer and take it over to them. We can easily stop by a drugstore or a discount store and pick up anything that individual might need in the way of material things to help them be more comfortable, or to help them be safer, or to help them heal more quickly. We have it pretty easy, don't we, compared to the old days. And yet we still have our own personal challenges and sometimes our own personal heartaches, and we have a tendency to withdraw, to pull back into that cocoon or our